A discussion of diversity in our sport, more Best of Texas, and a conversation with San Antonio legend George Block. Here we go. It's the TXWaterpolo Podcast. James Smith in Austin and Joe Linehan in North Texas. How are you, Joe?
I'm good, James. How are you?
I'm good. You know, something's funny about your voice up there. It sounds like you're in a property that's empty.
I am. We are preparing our house to be sold. So there you go.
You can hear your voice reverberating against the walls. It's so clean. Yeah. So what's going on? Where are you going?
Steph and I are moving to San Antonio.
You familiar with this town? You've been there before?
I grew up in San Antonio. I have family still down there. Steph has family down there. Steph has more family that's moving down there.
Nice.
So it makes sense as far as the family is kind of set up. And then she got a great job in the Comau ISD school district. She's going to be an instructional coach. Obviously, I work for USA Waterpolo and work out of the house, but it's also going to give me a little bit more of an opportunity to work hands-on with a lot of the growth and development kind of aspects kind of down there in San Antonio as far as water polo is concerned.
Right. We'll get into that a little bit here in a moment. So we're going to be neighbors, basically, San Antonio, Austin corridor.
Just right around the corner.
Just an hour and 15 minutes away. No problem. Because do you have any idea like where you're going to go? Like where you're looking for a place to live? Because it's not like downtown San Antonio.
No, we're going to be living out at 281 and 46, which is north of town. And it's close to where she works. And I'm going to drive into town probably a couple times a week type thing. So
okay.
It's just a nice, easy place. We're going to lease for a year to kind of see if that works for us or not. And then we'll be buying a place next summer. So.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that actually in the next segment because you have, I think you have some things that are on the books or in your plans for San Antonio, which are really huge. We've talked about it for a while. It's been a little bit of a secret, but not that big a secret. You announced it on a Zoom meeting last week. I was so mad about that, but anyway. Yeah. We have to dive into this huge issue. It's not one that I relish, I have to say, because it is complicated. But we obviously are in a pretty severe state in this country altogether. And again, as I said last week, this is just a little stupid water polo podcast, tiny little microcosm of what goes on in the country, and that's sort of the way that I like to keep it. What I thought might be interesting to at least address is that. And I know this just having observed it myself, is that USA Water Polo for many years, in fact, maybe since I was in late high school, late 80s, early 90s, has had a series of efforts to increase diversity, because this is the obvious thing to state. And it has been said how many millions of times, like this sport is overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly wealthy, generally speaking, as opposed to, say, the European people who come and play. They're sort of mystified by how everything is sort of top down here. But there are and have been efforts to change that over time. And you are part of that, I would say. And maybe not directly, maybe it's your own work on the side. But for the state of Texas, that is something that obviously is going to be addressed along with everywhere else in the country. But what is it that you recall and can share and can talk about effort-wise in this state to increase diversity?
I mean, obviously, I work for USA Water Polo, specifically sports growth, and even more specifically Texas development. But yeah, I mean, we have a diversity and inclusion problem within our sport of water polo. I mean, you do not see a lot of people of color. As far as at the water polo games, as far as coaches, as far as referees, we also have an issue with like a gender kind of a problem too. There's a lot more males that are playing than females. So, I mean, I just think it's a everyday kind of effort, and I think there's a lot of programs out there and things that are working and not working. I mean, we've gone out to El Paso and had some youth water polo get started out there, down in the Rio Grande Valley. there's a great opportunity for a lot of diversity and inclusion down in the San Antonio kind of areas, but there's tons of opportunities over in Houston and North Texas and Austin as well. And I think it's everybody's responsibility to kind of look at their programs and see how can we do a better job.
That's fair enough.
And kind of work with local cities and work with local YMCA's to provide programming that meets all different classes and socio-economic groups. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an issue that's fraught, and it's made some news in the USA Water Polo community this week, as it probably should have. But I'm gonna say that we leave it at that and move on to stuff that's more water polo related. It's something that's gonna emerge, and has actually. Let me back up a moment. Like the idea, or at least my recollection of how things happen, is that these things sort of crop. I should be really clear about this, that USA Water Polo's efforts to address diversity sort of come and go. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that there are campaigns, and then something happens, and then there's another campaign and such. So there's just no way that this is not going to come up again now in these particular circumstances. So it'll be something that we will monitor.
Yeah, and it's going to take a consistent effort on a variety of levels, of which USA Water Polo is going to be part of that effort.
Yes.
To make this happen.
Yes.
And to make a significant change in our sport. And I know there's people out there that are going to be saying yes, 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 and there's going to be other people that are saying, oh, the sport's fine. No, this is part of sports growth. I think, kind of people have told myself and told you, James, oh my God, kind of Texas has grown and grown and grown. Yes, thank you very much, and I appreciate the comment, but we have just taken some baby steps. There's so much more work to do.
I would say
work that we can do.
Yeah.
And diversity and inclusion should be and will be a big part of that.
Yeah. I would say that's my preferred way to address it, or at least to discuss it, is that there's plenty more to be done for the sake of growth in and of itself, but also for a broader, set of experiences. And I'm not going to go knee deep into my club. I'm actually quite proud of the way that we are. And that's not to say that things can't get better, but it's something that we're going to obviously be talking about for years, but I figured we had to discuss this at least a little bit. Actually, Joe's the one who figured we had to discuss this more than I did, just to be fair.
We both decided to discuss it.
Oh yeah, equally. Okay. I had written down from last week's script, let's move on to the lighter side of things when we went to start to talk about coronavirus. And so we're something in the same situation, except the news is pretty decent. I mean, a lot of this stuff got kind of buried in the larger news, which is completely understandable. But there are more teams that have gotten in the pool, in addition to mine. Pegasus had apparently more than 70 kids on its first day. They had the people coming and going all day at a pool that is a racket club. Is that right?
Called T-Bar M. Yeah, it's a racket club that has a pool that's open seasonally. It's a 6-lane shallow deep pool, and I think they just rotated groups in and out all day. It's awesome.
I'd love to. I actually am thinking about checking out these practices because I want to know what it is that they do. I've been asked by people from all over the country. In fact, I'll address that in a moment. But I've had people ping me from all over the country about what it is that we've been doing at practice, and I will reiterate that. So they are at the T-Bar M Private Racket Club. Is that how you call it?
Yes. And so what I believe Pegasus is doing, they had 12 kids per practice. There's no contact. It's passing only, and individual skills. Swimming is only 2 per lane, and they start at opposite ends.
No shooting.
I don't know.
Okay. I'm not trying to put Joe on the spot. He doesn't have to know every answer. I'm genuinely curious about this, and we will follow up with our friends at Pegasus to see what that looks like. So at the same time, Triumph down in Houston is in the, I think you called it the Williams Indoor Pool, and right?
Yeah, just down there in the League City kind of area.
Okay.
And they started last week, and they had an older kids group, a younger kids group. I think they had 2 practices last week. And they're starting again this week. But they have a group that comes in, and then they come in one entrance, they leave a different entrance. They have a group, and then obviously, so the kids don't kind of talk back and forth. They have specific places where they have their stuff kind of put down. I don't believe that the pool gave them any specific criteria other than like just to do the general social distancing.
Yeah.
So I think that they did a very responsible thing, and they came up kind of with their own plan. And they have, 12 people per practice. They only have a couple people in the pool, and they do practice the social distancing and no contact as of right now. And I'm sure that'll change as all this is, and as we move forward this summer. So.
Yeah, of course, it's going to change over time. Okay, so that's another club in that general area. South Side is in the pool once a week. Is that right?
Yeah, they started yesterday. So
okay.
They have, I think they were only because all groups have to spread a little bit more. They were given 3 practices kind of during the week, and so 3 time slots. So what they did was they split their club up, so each athlete gets once a week in the pool, and they're continuing to do their dryland sessions via Zoom, and once a week chalk talk. So they're still kind of like, working with the athletes on more than one occasion, but now they just have once a week in the water. And I believe they have 2 or 3 people per lane, and I do believe that they are doing passing and shooting. So
okay, yeah,
but it's still no contact.
Yeah, exactly. And so our practice that was supposed to take place tonight was canceled because the city forgot to put sand down on the new paint job on the floor, so they got to do that. But we will be there Thursday. For those who are interested, the rules that we've adopted are based on the city of Round Rock has told us basically to follow the rules that the governor has set out, and so we are, and those are guidelines, by the way. They're not legally enforceable, and I know that can sound a little dodgy, but the point being that they're guidelines. And so we put together a series of rules as well. By far, the most prominent one is the social distancing thing. It's a 2-meter thing. You get within 2 meters of somebody and hang out there. Obviously, passing one another is going to happen, but you sitting there touching someone in the pool or out of the pool is like, okay, get dressed and go home. So that's our primary rule. We obviously, if you have symptoms, no way, get out of here. You're not even coming close. And we keep parents off the deck. We keep the coaches separated as well. We do dry land where everybody has a lounge chair that's 2 meters apart, and they keep their stuff there and they stay there for dry land or for any sort of lecture or conversation kind of thing. So those are the sort of general rules by which we abide, and I'm trying to create a little bit of variety in our practices given those pretty strict rules.
That's good. And then there's we talked about them a little bit last week, but the TXWaterpolo, which is club, they did start last Wednesday, and they had 2 practices. They have a splash ball group, then they have a 14U group, and then they have an 18U group. And they practice back to back to back. They're in the water for 45 minutes per session. I think they have 7 or 8 kids per group. So right now, that's about 20 to 25 kids, right, total, which is great for a brand new program. And like I believe that they're doing temperature checks for every kid coming in. So got it. In order to for all the social distancing stuff, but they're also doing temperature checks as well.
Right.
So everybody's a little bit different on what they're doing.
Yeah, which is what to be expected. It's really interesting.
Yeah, just exactly. And to my knowledge, I don't believe there's any school district pools that are allowing clubs in yet. So.
Right. And so I was going to ask you that real quickly, maybe is the big clubs, Viper Pigeon, Thunder, those, have you heard anything about what the next steps are for them maybe?
I think they're just looking at alternatives because a lot of, they utilize big school district pools and stuff like that. They have a lot of water time at those pools. Unfortunately, it's not working out as of right now.
Right.
I think they're just being patient. I think those pools are going to become kind of more available here in late June, early July. So all the athletes, parents, just be patient. It will happen. But I think they're looking for alternatives, whether it's HOA pools, either kind of local private pools. But they're not the only ones kind of looking for pool time.
Yeah.
There's also big swim clubs that are looking for pool time as well.
Yeah.
So, and there are summer league swim teams that are looking for pool time. So, kind of pool time is almost turning into ice time now.
Yeah, it really is.
So, which for anybody that knows what I'm talking about, that is for youth hockey, you have people that practice from 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning, so.
Yeah, Masters too. That's the best part. Like the old players, they'll come in at midnight and play or something like that.
So, but yeah, that's kind of the gist. It's a little bit better this week than it was last week, and I'm hoping that it'll be a little bit better next week. So.
All right, we're done with this first segment. We'll come back and we'll talk about a story that's gotten buried by all of this other stuff. It's not even really a story. It's as I called it last week, a stunt on our part. But Best of Texas Part 2 is now closed, or at least the first round of that, and we'll come back and go over that in a moment.
In many podcasts, this time would be filled with ads for electric toothbrushes or recruiting services. Not here. Instead, we're asking you to show your support for TXWaterpolo by donating to it. Go to TXWaterpolo.com/donate and help us continue covering the sport we love in the Lone Star State.
Hi, this is Natalie Benson, and you are listening to a podcast about water polo in Texas.
September's gone and I shouldn't have stayed. My hopes have all faded, but nothing else changed. The city.
James and Joe back with you. We wanted to cover just a couple more things because we got an interview coming up. At least that's the plan for the time being. We have completed our first round of the second Best of Texas tournament. These are programs. We're going to go over the results, but truthfully, they didn't really change much from last week when we did some preliminary ones. So I'll go through these one by one, and you can make a comment, and I'll bet they'll be almost identical to the things that you said last week. How does that work, Joe?
Sounds good.
Yeah, good. Baytown Sterling girls over Clear Creek girls, 64 to 36%. That was a surprise, right?
No.
Oh, that was not the surprise. Okay, next one.
that was expected, I think.
Clear Lake girls, 60% over Cy Creek girls, 42%.
That's a bit of a surprise to me.
Yeah.
Now, not necessarily that Clear Lake won. I'm not surprised that they won, but that there was a 20-point difference. So
they had a lot of voters,
and
they got the vote out.
But just that Cy Creek actually had more state championships than girls.
Yeah, so. I know. Go back and read those accomplishments. They're pretty amazing. So, yeah. Of
course, yeah, it's good.
But the vote is the vote, and the vote stands. Okay. Then we start getting into the non-Houston area girls matchups, and Marshall ran away with it against South Lake Carroll, basically 70% to 30%.
Good for Marshall. Good for Marshall.
I completely agree. We just talked about San Antonio, and we'll do that more. And speaking of which, so this is who do you root for if you're from San Antonio? Alamo Heights fell to Clark, and we've obviously been talking up Clark quite a bit. Clark beat them 76% to 24%. Alamo Heights has a pretty serious pedigree, but Clark, man, oh man, those teams were awesome.
Yeah, they won 4 in a row. I think they were in 8 or 9 straight state championship games. Yeah, that was a pretty good stretch in the 80s. So.
Okay, so the matchups will be the Baytown Sterling girls versus the Clear Lake girls, and then the Marshall girls versus the Clark. Oh, another Marshall Clark setup. Oh, that's good. Okay, yeah, good news.
That'll be fun for that Baytown in Clear Lake to see who's going to get the most voters out there.
Exactly.
2 top teams, and probably in the history of Texas. And it's great to see the Marshall and Clark teams and those dominant groups from the 80s kind of compete. So
absolutely. Yeah. We'll see who pushes that message the most on Twitter. You know who you are. Boys, the first round is over as well. Clear Lake over Clear Creek. That was 60 to 40. Then this is, I don't think, much of a surprise. Baytown Sterling over Side Creek, 80 to 20%.
I think that was probably chalk. I think most people would agree that that the Baytown Sterling and the Clear Lake boys are the top 2 programs there.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you say this is no insult to Side Creek to be in this position, and it's true. It's just not. Baytown Sterling's been a phenomenal program. Same with this next one, St. Mark's over Alamo Heights boys, 73% to 27% ish. And finally, here's the other matchup. Oh, I forgot to ask. I asked you last week, so you have to guess because things may have changed a little bit. Clark versus Marshall boys. What's the result? Tell me.
53-47. Clark winning.
Totally wrong. 54.4 to 45.6. You were way, way off.
That was at it. But, Clark probably had the best of the Marshall groups back in the day, and they won again 4 straight. They were in that state championship game a ton. And St. Mark's, well deserving state championship from 1977 to 2019.
Yeah. It's been educational for me to watch these matchups because I didn't know necessarily the individual accomplishments of the program. So well done to those who won in the first round. We'll come back next week with round 2. Those matchups will be upcoming. And in the meantime, you have not yet had a conversation with George Block, but that's our intention, and that's what's coming next. Was there anything that you wanted to share about your experience with him that you didn't share last week?
I don't remember what I shared last week, but George Block is the reason that there was water polo at Alma Heights, and then he moved from Alma Heights to Northside, and kind of once their first pool got built there, and it was only 4 high schools then, and it just grew and expanded, and like the number of high schools, but he brought water polo with him. It was kind of part of their scene as far as, the fall season, the spring season, there was an age group program. And that was he was probably the driving factor of water polo being part of the aquatic scene in San Antonio. And probably the primary reason why they were so dominant there in the 80s. So,
right.
And he was also my coach whenever I was a club swimmer there. So he was a big influence on my life. So
right, there you go. Full disclosure. That's going to be super interesting. I think we're going to leave it at that because we did talk a little bit about San Antonio as far as the strength of its programs, but George Block has been there for a long time. He's the kind of person whose name is on the side of buildings. So it's somebody that we retired
now, but he's still on some committees. He's still kicking around, and he's been very influential, and not just in San Antonio and Texas water polo and swimming, but throughout from coast to coast as well. And I'm looking forward to kind of getting and helping out the San Antonio groups that are trying to grow water polo there. It's going to be a challenge, but it's going to be fun. I see kind of San Antonio being an upstart program here in the next couple of years. They already are, but now I think that there's going to be a ton more kind of water polo being played there very soon. So
yeah, based on our conversations offline, Joe, I'm worried about it too. Like you guys are going to be pretty killer.
You guys
from San Antonio. I told you. I have a mental rivalry between Austin and San Antonio, but I don't actually want to. I would rather have all the talent that they have down there, than not have any talent at all. So
no, it's exciting. There's always been the north side schools that have been playing. Now the northeast schools are going to be playing in fall of 2021. Alma Heights is building a new pool. Hopefully the San Antonio kind of ISD people are going to be playing as well. The Comount kind of ISD people in New Braunfels and kind of North San Antonio are kind of hopefully be playing. So there's going to be a ton more. Plus we have all those teams from the Valley and Corpus that are playing too, and they're going to come up. It's going to be like a central hub, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a lot of water polo going to be played there soon.
It is a challenge. I mean, you're the one who did so much to help grow it down in the Valley, and especially for those who are not from Texas. I mean, the region in the West here, from Waco essentially to the Valley, is essentially like it's 10 hours. It's 6 hours from the Valley to Austin, I think. So it's a gigantic territory. Yeah, a lot of water polo all over that region. Yep.
Yeah, it's great, and there's a lot of very good people that are growing it, and that are doing their part, and I'm just doing my part. So
you are doing your part. I'm doing my part by saying that we're going to move on to the conversation that Joe is hopefully going to have with George Block, and we'll be back after that.
Hey, this is Mark Lawrence from Austin College, head coach of the men's and women's water polo programs and home of our Kangaroos. When I'm interested in what's going on with Texas water polo, I always listen to TXWaterpolo Podcast.
Well, we made it out back, but it ain't hard to feel the bad blues.
Welcome to today's podcast talk with George Block. George Block is basically the godfather of aquatics in San Antonio. He coached at Alma Heights. He was the aquatics director at Northside ISD. He has a pool named after him. He was also the head coach for Quad A 4, I think. He was my head coach, for my club. So he's also been on the boards of ASCA and USA Swimming and USA Water Polo. George, thank you so much for doing this. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Happy to watch you succeed. I
don't know if I've succeeded at all. I am in the sport of water polo, and I wish every day that, why don't I coach golf or basketball or football? But I fell in love with water polo at age 9 or 10 in Whispering Oaks in San Antonio. So I love what I do, and it's a whole lot of fun. So what are you doing nowadays?
I'm mostly retired, and I'm still doing a lot on nonprofit boards with swimming and just in the community at large.
Okay, good. And how are you doing with the whole COVID-19?
We sequestered in place in South Padre Island.
Not a bad place to sequester.
We figured if we're going to be in prison, that's a real nice prison.
Okay, there you go. And I'm sure you got out and kind of walked the beach a little bit here with your mask on.
Got 4.5 miles of walking in every day, and I brought a TRX down to do some strength work, and we read a lot and ate too much.
Read a lot and ate too much. Yes. Was it? My wife and I tend to eat out kind of way too much. So the whole COVID thing is we did a lot more dishes.
Yeah.
But no, it's I'm glad that we're opening up now and pools are becoming a little bit more kind of available, and swim programs and in water programs are starting back up. So we'll see how that goes kind of moving forward.
Yep.
Yeah. Just pending like an additional peak or something, which we hope does not happen. So
it's already happening. So
I know. Yeah. Was it? So, all right. I just said that you're the godfather of aquatics in San Antonio. So you started at Alma Heights.
Yes, sir.
And you brought water polo with you. So just tell us about that. You started in 1973. Go.
That was my first job. I was a pentathlete at Fort Sam Houston at the time, and the coach at Alma Heights was Pete Williams. And he asked myself and another guy, Tim Henrich, who you may remember as Torque, if we would come and coach water polo. And we went, okay. But he handed us sheet of rules, and they were using a volleyball, and you scored a goal if you got it between the ladders on either side of the pool.
You got to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere.
It was sort of mall ball. And we did that for a year and said, look, if we're going to do this again, we want to do it right and really coach water polo. And, I said, I think it makes for bad culture on the team if part of your program is deliberately half-assed. If you're not going to do it right and it doesn't matter, don't do it.
You're preaching the choir, my friend. You're preaching the choir.
So we said we're going to do it right from that point. And so the next year we started the high school team and a club team to support it.
Nice. Like a club water polo team or a club, like an aquatic swimming and club team?
It was all of the above. All the swimmers played water polo and all the water polo players swam. But you had to, in order to have insurance, you got to register with water polo.
Of course. So now tell us a little bit about those early state high school kind of championships. I know Fosdick was involved at a certain level. It was kind of Wild Wild West days.
Well, it was very Wild Wild West because it wasn't run by an organization, by TISCA or by the UIL. It was run by FOS. And so, in some ways it made it crazy. In other ways, he made it happen. So, you can't bitch about it too much because if it wasn't for him, it wouldn't be there now.
No, again, of course.
But we would definitely do things like show up at state and he would hand us a new set of rules or new set of interpretations 30 minutes before the first game that he had just got out in California at a college tournament they were at. And so we'd have played the entire season under one set of rules and one set of interpretations. And then 30 minutes before the first game, we were all given a new set of rules, a new set of interpretations.
So, I mean, you were coaching kind of the Alma Heights team. Who were some of the other team and rivalries at the time in San Antonio, or
There
if you
were
had to travel?
no other teams in San Antonio.
No other teams.
When we would do tournaments, we would typically split our high school team a couple of different ways, and our club team, we'd invite a lot of private schools up from Mexico. St. Mark's almost always would come down from Dallas. We had a really good relationship with St. Mark's. And every now and then,
Stutzman.
not very often, a team would come over from Houston, but they didn't need to, because even back then they had plenty of competition. And so it was really St. Mark's, us, and some Mexican teams.
Okay. Well, I mean, like, you got to play kind of who you got to play. And kind of one of the best things that I think happened in Texas, that it took California until the mid 90s, was there was a girls water polo in the 70s. It started in the 70s. A championship started in the late 70s. And I thought that was great.
It was from day one was women's. There was never any difference. They were on different weekends, the state. And so then the season went the same way. You'd have a boys weekend, a girls weekend, a boys weekend, a girls weekend, a boys weekend, a girls weekend, then, girls state, boys state, all the way through. And so I never experienced it from 1973 forward where there wasn't a girls water polo championship that was on a par with the guys.
Well, I tell this, and I don't make it a secret. I would much rather coach a bunch of 18, 16 and under girls than a bunch of 18, 16 and under boys. Because they listen better. They understand the little things, and boys are off the reservation at that age, as I was as well. So,
yeah.
You coached a lot of people that were off the reservation. I don't think I was as bad as some people, but I am sure you can share a story or two right now.
The territory at that age.
Yes, there you go. And then you won 2 championships. Like, you won boys and girls in 1979, right?
Well,
were you there, or had you already moved to Northside at that point?
No, I was at Northside. It was kids that I had coached that won. But I came over, my last year at Alamo Heights was 77.
Okay. So what made you kind of do that transition? I know you became the aquatics director over at kind of Northside. So just tell me what was just inviting about it.
Was water polo was a big part of it, is that I knew that if I came, we could immediately expand water polo in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And if I didn't, there was probably a 90% chance that it wouldn't.
Yep.
And so I came over. It was sort of, at the time, it was a lateral move because, when we brought kids into the pool, we brought them in, sat them in the bleachers and said, we're going to have the tryouts in the deep end. The people look panicked and said, or you can go into the shallow end, whatever you want. And anybody who went to the shallow end, we put on the novice team, and anybody who went to the deep end, we put on the age group team.
You got to, hey, you don't have a whole lot of time. You got to do what you got to do, in those short amount of time.
Pretty primitive at the start. In fact, the truth is, the only reason I got that job is they had offered it to a bunch of really top coaches, and they came down and said, you got no team, you got nobody out here, you got no summer league feeders, you got nothing. No. And so, they ran out of really good coaches to bring in, so they got me.
So water polo kind of was a big part of that kind of transition.
It was a huge part of it at the time.
And you brought it from Alma Heights, and obviously you probably also built the summer league swim systems and stuff, because that's what I grew up in, and that was the early 80s whenever I started.
All that stuff.
My
last year at Heights, we won state, and then both boys and girls won it 2 years later. But because we had it sort of established, we'd already won one. Then Heights was always going to hire a good water polo coach, and they've done that. They've always hired a good water polo coach.
Yeah, and then you moved to Northside, and the swimming just excelled, obviously. But This is the water polo podcast, but basically, I know they're the Houston teams, and they kind of dominated, the 70s. And then Alma Heights kind of, started doing well. but then the north side teams just dominated the 80s. Just tell us about about some of the good programs, the good coaches.
So the pool opened in February of '78. So with like a week to go in the high school season, the pool opened.
That's okay.
Yeah, we didn't care. It finally
opened. I'm sure it was supposed to open in September. So there you go.
Yeah, and I had that year I had Holmes at Alamo Heights, I had Marshall at Northeast, and I had Jay at Lackland. So I just drove around the different practices.
That's okay. And so were you the head coach for all of them?
For all of them that first year.
Oh, geez. There you go.
But the district was really committed to doing it right. Partly because back then, building what then was a large natatorium was really controversial. And the real reason they built it wasn't for competitive swimming. It was, and you can sort of think about many drives to the pool. There's so many drainage ditches in Northside that every time it rained, kids would drown. And what they wanted was swim lessons and what they called drown proofing. And so every child in third grade came through the pool for 2 weeks of swim lessons, just to get exposed to water and, teach them as much as we could and teach them safety and, push off the bottom, roll on your back, call for help, all that stuff. And that was the big driver. But the second is they wanted to succeed athletically. So when we started, I was able to hire a coach for boys and girls at each high school. And so the first decade, we had a boys coach and a girls coach at each high school. And so that meant that the boys teams and girls teams got a lot of attention.
Yep.
Even if they, the boys were in the practice or in the water practice, the girls would be outside stepping through it, run through it on dry land, sort of playing like team handball type water polo outside,
just kind of rotating the groups in and out.
Offensive concepts, the same as you experienced morning and afternoon. But if the girls were or the boys were in the morning, then the girls were outside doing sort of team handballish water polo outside.
Now, but didn't you have some coaches that coached both boys and girls at the same high school?
Well, one of the things that was going on in the state at that time was that was really the beginning of the budget cuts to education that went on for about 20 years. And when we got to a certain point, when coach would leave, I couldn't replace him, and we had to combine teams. And so we sort of gradually went from having a boys coach and a girls coach to just one coach at each school.
Yeah, because I know I was very young at the time, but I remember, I think Mark Elliott at Clark, I know Doug Andrew at Marshall. I think they coached both.
Like when Mark was the boys coach at Clark, Scott Zielinski was the girls coach.
Okay.
So, sort of the way that went. But when Scott left, I couldn't replace him. Then Mark became both.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. I thank you so much for bringing water polo to Northside. There was obviously, I remember as a young pup kind of going to the games, and my older brother was playing. It was great. It was great to watch the games. And I think and then we traveled to Houston for the state championship, or the state championship kind of wasn't in San Antonio. So, are there any players that kind of stick out from that time frame or that era from the Marshall, Clarks, Jay?
Well, so like if I go way back into Alamo Heights, I think the two best players that come out of there, boys, were Pat McCullough and Tilden Schaefer. And Pat went out to UOP and played and has never moved back. He's a geologist out in California now.
A lot of people don't move back, although a lot of people are moving back or just moving from California to here.
Yeah, moving from. And Tilden went to Brown and played 4 years out there, and then he ran for district attorney here in San Antonio this year. But those two, when we had the club team at Heights, they started playing together from the time they were 8 till the time they were 18. and they were just like radar by their senior year. That might have been the weakest Heights team, but those two were so good they made it all the way to the state final.
It doesn't shock me at all.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take a whole lot to be good in high school sometimes. You have 2-3 good dominant players that have been playing together for a long time. It's still the same way. So
yeah. And then if I sort of go, the top goalie from Heights was a guy named Andy Gates. I guess from water polo you may know him. He's a referee now out in California.
I've heard of Andy, yes.
Does a lot of
and I think I've had a beer with Andy, but
he coached high school for years and years and years out there, and now he's retired from high school, but doing a lot of college reffing.
On the dark side, but that's okay. I'm just playing all those referees that are listening. I ref too, so it's okay.
The top players, one of the guy who was a freshman, the transition year from Heights to Northside, was Terry Vetters.
Yeah, Terry. Here you go.
And he went out and played college in California and made the national junior team back then. And the national junior team coach said he was the best defensive player on the whole national junior team. And so, he was, in high school, a real force to be reckoned with. Girls around that time, Valerie Dominguez, who then became Valerie Bean and now is Valerie Martin. She was, she made the junior team and then national B. So she was quite a force. On her team was Terry's sister, Mary Ellen Vetters, who played 4 years at Stanford.
Yep.
So she was really solid. Sort of going to your era, probably the best goalie ever at Northside was David Proft, but he just hated being a goalie.
Yeah, exactly. But who does like being goalies except for true goalies? So
yeah, and he had all the skill set and the body and everything for it. He was just amazing. But after about a year and a half, 2 years, he said, "No, I got to get out in the field. I want to score. I want to shoot."
Yeah, he could also swim a little bit too. So there you go. Plus, he just has this huge torso, the long arms.
Yeah, he could egg beater out to his knees and all that stuff.
And Dave still plays. Still plays. So he still plays for a club called TXWaterpolo up in Austin. So he's done well for himself.
And then in that era just before that were guys like Cy Wintery, who ended up being captain at Air Force Academy. Ellis Eaton ended up being captain at Air Force Academy. We've had a lot of players do really well at the academies, Air Force, Navy. Did really well in those environments.
Yeah, we even had like my older brother who wasn't necessarily a standout on kind of some of those Clark teams, but also Chris Olvera from the Marshall and Clark teams kind of back in the days. So I mean, there are a ton of kids, and they kept being competitive all the way up through the end of the 90s, like the 80s and 90s. But then kind of Houston started kind of rising a little bit at the end of the 80s and early 90s. So
a lot of that was demographics. Houston boomed with suburban growth at that time.
Yep.
I mean, from living there, it used to be a schlep out to Woodlands. Now it's just suburb. Same thing from Katy.
It's still a schlep though.
Yeah, it's still a schlep. And Katy used to be way outside of Houston, and now it's just constant.
Yeah.
So there was this massive
urban sprawl,
and affluent urban sprawl, and pool building urban sprawl.
Yep.
And Houston had been sort of cloud seeded with some pretty darn good coaches and players. You talked about earlier, we were just BSing. We were talking about, Clear Lake back in the day. Lanny Landtroop had a hell of a program at Clear Lake, and those guys could really play, and they could really swim. And so there were a lot of guys who they just had a lot of potential coaches. They had a lot of good players. They had a lot of good coaches. And so it wasn't too surprising to see it sprawl. A guy who was sort of the godfather of swimming up in New Braunfels, and he gave me a lesson in humility one time and said, don't get really carried away. You're a really great coach. It's all demographics. And he pulled out his computer program and showed demographics all over the country, and where the Reds lit up, it was just great swimming all over the country.
It is, yeah, it is. It is definitely true. I mean, but some of those great San Antonio teams. So what did they have that was better besides demographics? That was better than like the Houston teams. I know they could swim, and I know that they had the fall season, they had the spring season. There was an age group program. So, I mean you had built that up.
We did all that. We had, the sort of the real fall season and a little short spring season. We'd always do a clinic every year. You remember the Fiesta Water Polo clinics that we always did?
Of course.
So we brought in a good California coach to keep us current so that we wouldn't get stagnant just with ourselves, which I think would be really easy to do in that environment. We had really good coaches, either from really good polo coaching backgrounds, like Kurt Swanson, and hopefully his Holmes team that was undefeated would be one of the all-time teams.
They were in the best of Texas in the top 16. So
I think the closest game they had all season was 10 or 11 points. Don Boyd came in with a lot of coaching experience. We had a guy at Marshall named Mike Phelps who had played high school in California at a pretty high level and then swam at Indiana. Debbie Starr played college at A&M. So we had a lot of experience, a lot of good coaches, and that created just a lot. Having everybody in one pool is sort of a disadvantage. The advantage is it makes it almost like a university academic department. There's so much sharing of ideas, and we had a guy from Michigan named Tom Topolsky who was just a freaking genius, and especially a genius at coaching girls. And he came up with some sort of, the ways that train girls to shoot so they wouldn't shoot like a girl, and some exercises.
Can't say that anymore, Coach. You can't say that. So there you go.
Yeah, but I just did. So you can edit that out. But he had all sorts of great ways that just developed some really good women shooters. And he was just brilliant, and the girls really responded to that. And so I think a lot of the magic was just having all those really good coaches in one room watching what each other was doing and sharing ideas.
Yeah. And and as we know, sometimes coaches get a little bit too protective of their stuff and they don't want to share. And I remember, Clark I went to Clark. So Clark is practicing and the Marshall is practicing, the coaches are talking and they're sharing different things, but then we play to try to go to state the next weekend, So
exactly.
I do remember. And you mentioned Debbie Starr. I remember Debbie Starr was my age group coach in 6th grade. My age group coach in 6th grade. But I do remember that, I don't know if it was going into my 8th grade year, but that the age group team was stopped.
Well, there's nobody to play it after a while. At first, Heights kept their age group team going. When Paul Bergen was the head women's coach at UT, he was also in charge of Longhorn Aquatics. And so the Texas women played polo, plus all of Longhorn Aquatics played polo. And that was a huge club. And so, they could put 20 teams in the water.
Yeah.
And, we could bring up 4 teams and Heights would bring up 2. It didn't take too many programs, and you could have a pretty quality age group tournament. You could play a lot of people. But I can't remember under which coach Heights dropped, and then once Bergen left, it just sort of petered out at Longhorn. When the coaches who worked for Bergen were all gone, water polo left. And so there's just nobody left to play other than play inter-squad.
Well, you'd be happy to know we had a tournament this past January called the Dare to Dream over MLK weekend. It was in Houston. We had 25 teams, all 12 and under.
Wow.
And with I think it was 12, 13 different clubs. So, and that was up from about 9 or 10 in like the previous year. So we're hoping to get that to be like 30 or 40 teams here soon. So again, just kind of grow the base, right? Just grow the base and get as many kids playing as possible. And, but then, I mean, also during high school, I think that, you know, we used to have like the fall season and then also the spring season, but then, you know, I know that they shifted the high school swimming, then the spring kind of high school season kind of went away a little bit.
I don't really know how the spring, I think when they were trying to sort of force the fall season, then the spring went away. When the UIL shifted the seasons, that really caused a lot of the sort of a mess, and, you know, not enough time for a fall season, not enough teams wanted to play in the spring.
Yep. No, but I mean, no, it's just, you know, and so what we're talking about is the high school swimming state used to be the middle of March. Then it got moved up to the middle of February.
Third week of March, and now it's second week of February.
So it got moved up quite a bit earlier. So, and then that also then kind of moved up a lot of club swimming from that might have started in early May to mid-May to like the beginning of April and stuff like that for long course season, stuff like that. So it just kind of shifted a lot of things. And that was one of the primary reasons if we fast forward back into late 2000s, kind of moving the spring and then the rise of the number of teams kind of throughout the state. So,
are you familiar with the Florida seasons, the way Florida does it?
Yeah, I mean, Florida, off the top of my head, they have changed a little bit, but I believe that they play high school water polo in the spring.
Right. And what they do is they start high school swimming first day of school, or even a little bit. They start whenever football and volleyball does.
Of course. Yep.
And they have their championship right around the second weekend in December. And then they play water polo then from sort of the day after Christmas until the first weekend of spring break. And then after spring break, the water polo club kids go to their water polo, the swimming club kids go to their swimming, and everybody's doing their summer thing.
Yep.
And I think that's a really good way to do it. It creates meaningful seasons for everything and still allows time for everything. And I think if we're going to be really successful in the long term, we need to not only think about adding water polo, but creating new season structures.
Oh, really?
It's really hard in anything that you do in life to just add stuff. You also have to subtract something. You have to create room for the new thing that you're adding.
You have to adjust and adapt and such like that. So
yeah,
you know, move forward.
Every addition requires a subtraction. Just otherwise, your life becomes too out of control. And so, I think one of the things that, in terms of implementing, how do you make high school water polo real? How do you make it really succeed? How do we do this? Especially given now that there are so many combined facilities like Northside's. You know, Houston sells a lot of single high school pools. But, you know, Dallas, I-35 corridor, San Antonio, it's all central facilities. I think we should be really looking at a version of that Florida type schedule.
Yeah. So, as I'm sure you're aware, that the UIL this past October of 2019, October 21st at 9:35 a.m. They officially sanctioned, and I know the day and time because that was a very long process. And I'm sure that you even were involved in that process way back in the day too. So,
the process was going back on in the 70s.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And it started, stop. And we finally figured out the rules of the game and started to play the game the way that UIL wanted us to play the game. And it was the first sport that was added in 20 years. The UIL decided to move the official season to the fall. It's going to start August 1, along with volleyball and football. Any thoughts on as far as the challenges, the possible, like, you know, kind of success stories of the fall 2021 season?
You know, fall is sort of always, to me, has been the traditional season.
Yep.
That's what I grew up with as a kid doing it myself. That's what I grew up with as a coach. That's what I implemented when I came to Northside. So I'm really just comfortable with that. The downside for the fall is it is extremely discriminatory against inner city teams.
Yeah.
Because the new kids, new freshmen, are literally learning how to swim at the same time they're learning how to play water polo. And so at best, if they stick with it, because that's a pretty negative experience, their first year is their second year.
Yep.
And so the most they'll get is 3 years of experience in high school.
Yep.
Compared to 4. And I almost think, especially now, if we're not being sensitized and sensitive to stuff that's structurally discriminatory, we're really neglecting our jobs and our leadership role.
Diversity and inclusion. That is on the forefront.
And I think that is a reason that that's another reason we should consider the Florida season, is that if kids start out with a swimming season, the inner city teams have a season to teach the kids how to swim and give them a little bit of endurance. And then they can jump into water polo, that they're not hanging on lane lines and hanging on the side of the pool and all that stuff. That you're giving the urban schools a chance. And I think that's really important. And I think it's something we should be thinking about, and sandpapering our consciences to make sure we're doing more than lip service.
No, and this is part of us kind of quote unquote getting ready for fall 2021.
Yeah.
Is the education aspect. It's preparing coaches, it's preparing programs, it's preparing athletic directors.
All right, once again, we're done. We're hoping that was a conversation with George Block when we were prepping for the show today. What we should say is that we hope that was a conversation with George Block. I'm fairly confident it's going to happen, but we're going to have to scramble tomorrow to get it incorporated. So, but Joe, no coaches to coaches or town hall this week. Why not? What's wrong, Joe?
The Zoom break for everyone.
The Zoom break for everyone, so that you can move.
Yes, I'm actually this week. It's a lot of just getting the house ready to go and packing and stuff like that. So yes, it's a little bit of, there is a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes into those things. So it's a break.
It really does.
Like it's a Zoom break. It's like kind of the first week of summer for a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, it's also my moving or preparing to move week. So
yeah, fair enough. Yeah, you're allowed. You can do that. Okay, well, safe travels, of course. You're going to keep me filled in on what's going on anyway. And best wishes to both you and Steph.
Oh, it's going to be fun. I'm probably still going to be up here in North Texas next week, but hopefully in San Antonio the week after that. So.
Yeah, everybody, hey, go by Joe's house if you're listening and you want to play some Grapevine. We can give you the address off the air. I'm not going to do it here, but yeah, go check that out.
And the kids would go to Carroll School, so there you go. So.
Yeah, what's the pitch? What did you say? So you're a Grapevine resident, but the kids would go to Carroll.
There you go. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you very much.
All right,
I think we're done. Yeah, let's remind everybody. We just reminded people of things that are coming up, but thanks to you and thanks to George Block, I'm hoping, for taking the time to talk with us, and thanks to everyone out there for listening and telling a friend about the TXWaterpolo Podcast. Find us on TXWaterpolo.com. Find us on social media, leave comments, give it to the cause, and stay up to date on the ever-changing state of the game in this big, beautiful state. So until next week, so long from Austin.
Trying to turn the world into a playground with all my might. Tables are turned and the ride is on the way round. Hold on tight, waiting in line, running my mind. I can't wait to get out again, counting the time. Thinking
and a production of TWP Sports LLC.
My dog is scratching at the door.
I can hear him.